Hey guys, what's up? Chef Pamela here, and for this week's edition of What's That Food Friday, we are actually gonna go on a little field trip to my garden to talk about fresh herbs. Hey guys, what's up? So I am in my backyard and I am going to show you some of the fresh herbs that are in my garden that are our What's That Food Friday today. So the first herb is right here. It is one of my favorite herbs in the entire world. It actually has a very, very mild onion flavor, and it has these very pretty long skinny leaves that stick up. And it is oftentimes used as a garnish because it is so delicate that you really don't want to cook it too much. This particular plant is a perennial, which means that it comes up every single year. So I actually planted this about 2 or 3 years ago, and it comes up every single spring. It is one of the first things to emerge. And this particular herb is called chives. So it is really, really nice. It has that nice mild onion flavor, and it is absolutely perfect for an omelet. So I am going to show you how to make a really nice fresh herb and cheese omelet today, utilizing chives and some of the other herbs I am going to show you. Hey guys, so this is the second herb that I'm going to be showing you for What's That Food Friday. You probably recognize it from school because it is one of the most used herbs that we cook with in the kitchen. Let me get a little more of a close-up for you. So this particular herb has a really nice mild flavor. It is one of the most utilized herbs as a garnish and in dishes because it imparts a really nice mild flavor. And this herb in particular is called parsley, and I'm going to show you how to utilize it in our omelet. Hey guys, so we're back in my kitchen and we are going to further discuss these herbs. So the first herb that we saw outside was chives. So this is kind of more of a close-up of the chives. You can see that they're very, very skinny leaves. And another herb that they're oftentimes confused with is scallions. So I have a bunch of scallions here. Let me take one out of the bunch. And as you can see, they're both very similar, but the scallions itself have a white part or light green part, and then they have the darker green part at the top. So they're similar, and they both have a mild onion flavor, but as you can see, the chives are much, much more delicate than the scallion. But I'm actually going to use both of them in my omelet because I think they're both going to add a really nice onion flavor. So the second herb that we looked at outside was Italian flat-leaf parsley. That is the particular variety of this parsley. They also have curly leaf parsley, which has a much curled or curlier leaf than this, but both have pretty much the same flavor. But one thing I wanted to mention is that oftentimes parsley is confused with cilantro because they look very similar. So I just wanted to kind of compare some of the leaves. So these are two of the leaves. This one right here is Italian flat-leaf parsley, and this one right here is cilantro. So as you can see, the cilantro has a much almost rounded shaped leaf, whereas the parsley has much pointier shaped leaves. I know they kind of look very similar, but they definitely have some very subtle differences to them. Another thing that you can do is just smell them. Cilantro has a very kind of unique smell to it that is very different than parsley. So if you're ever unsure of which is which, just smell them. Parsley has a much milder smell. Sometimes it doesn't even really smell that much. So that would be another way that you could tell them apart. But if you really take a look, the cilantro is much, much more rounder of a shape. So when you look at them next to each other, you can kind of tell them apart pretty easily, I think. But of course, I work with these herbs all the time. But you can really see here, kind of in the bunches, how the parsley is much pointier of a leaf than the cilantro. So with that being said, we are going to cut these herbs up to use them in an omelet. A lot of people have been requesting that I do a video on how to make a really simple omelet, and I'm going to show you a way that is pretty much foolproof. And by following these simple steps, you can make a delicious, easy omelet at home. So I'm going to be utilizing these herbs and some cheddar cheese just because that's what I have on hand. So the first thing we're going to do is pick off some of these leaves of the parsley. You can use the stems as well. The stems actually have a lot of flavor, and you should not be throwing your herb stems out. I actually use them in a lot of cooking because if you mince them up, they really are very flavorful, and once they're minced, you can't even tell that it's the stem and not the leaf. Anyway, so I'm going to pick all these off. Now I'm going to kind of roll them up into a tight little bundle, and it's going to make it a lot easier for me to cut these. So I'm going to use my knife and just very, very carefully, watching my fingers, cut this as small as possible. And I'm just kind of doing like a rough chop because I don't want them microscopic. So I'm actually going to set my stems aside. And another thing I want to mention, you can save these parsley stems or even thyme stems or rosemary stems and put them in a plastic bag in your freezer, and you can throw them into sauces to impart flavor, and then just pick them out when you're done. And it's a really, really great way to add some freshness to a sauce when you don't actually have the herb on hand. So definitely hold on to these. So anyway, I'm going to move these to the side. Now I am going to cut my chives. Now chives are obviously very long, so what I like to do is kind of cut them down, kind of stack them like that, and then I'm going to cut them as small as possible just because that is how I like my chives in my omelet. And as you can kind of see, once they're cut, they're a beautiful garnish, and they have such a beautiful mild onion flavor. So I'm gonna scoop these up and just kind of show you. These are so, so pretty as a garnish. So beautiful, just tiny little pops of mild onion flavor. So I'm gonna move these across my cutting board. Now I am going to cut one scallion. So a lot of recipes you'll see will say only on scallion white or only scallion green. I use the whole thing because why would you only want to utilize part of it? I don't know. I don't understand that. But some recipes will have you say saute the white part because it's more of like a thicker part of the onion. Or the scallion, and then just use the green part as a garnish because it's a little bit more delicate, but that's kind of up to you. Another thing I want to mention with scallions is that you can save the little root parts at the end and just put them in a little tiny bit of water, and they will actually regrow. It's actually one of the easiest herbs for you to regrow, and then you could just plant them in soil and you just continue to cut them when you need them, and then they will keep regrowing and resprouting, which is awesome. So definitely save your little root ends. So I'm going to cut the white part first. So I cut off the green part, and then I'm actually going to cut this down the middle just so my pieces of scallion are a little bit smaller in my omelet. Now you could saute this white part prior to putting it in the center of your omelet, but I'm probably just going to keep it as is because I really like that onion flavor. But anytime you're making an omelet, if you're using fillings like mushrooms or just regular white onion or spinach or anything that you want cooked in the omelet, you need to saute that prior to adding your eggs to the pan, because it's not going to cook enough by just adding it raw to the omelet. And then I'm going to cut the green part really nice and thin. There we go. It smells so good in here. I wish the camera had a smell feature. And then I'm just going to take I'm going to rip off a nice chunk of cilantro. I like to use some of the stems too, because they're very thin, and why not utilize the whole thing? I am going to wrap it up as tight as I can because it'll make it easier for me to cut. And same as the parsley, I am just gonna kind of chop it roughly so it's small but not microscopic. Beautiful. So now at this point, I am going to move over to the stove and show you how to make our omelet. Okay guys, so we're over at the stove and I am going to show you how to make an omelet. So the first thing we need to do is crack our eggs into a bowl. I'm using just 2 large eggs. There we go. And you need to make sure that you season them. So I'm going to season my eggs with a little bit of salt, some fresh cracked pepper, and I personally like crushed red pepper in mine, but totally optional. And some people like to add a little bit of cream or a little bit of milk to their egg mixture. I personally don't think that that's necessary, but if you do that at home, that is totally up to you. And I use a fork, the old-fashioned way, to whisk it up. And you really want to make sure that there's no visible chunks of egg whites. You want to make sure it's completely 100% mixed. All right, so that looks good. So, set my fork aside. Spatula. So I have my pan here over a low heat. I have an electric stove, so mine is on a 3, so it's pretty low. And I just sprayed it with some cooking spray. I am going to add my eggs in. Make sure you use your rubber spatula to scrape it all out of the bowl because you don't want to waste any. Now, you have a few options. You could add the herbs now and kind of mix it all in so they're mixed throughout the omelet, or you can add them kind of towards the end once the egg is more cooked so that it's just a filling. So that is kind of up to you. But what you want to do is use your spatula almost like you're making scrambled eggs, but by moving the egg around in the pan, you're actually forming really nice curds within the omelet, or curds are kind of like the cooked pieces of egg, and you're actually helping it cook a little quicker. So you're just gonna kind of move it around until the egg really kind of sets up. Now I'm using kind of a bigger pan just because I like my omelets kind of on the thinner side, but that is totally up to you. If you used a smaller pan, you would have a thicker omelet. So that is kind of like your preference. So the egg is kind of set at this point, making sure there's no kind of holes in the omelet. Go around this edge of the pan. Make sure it's all kind of together. Now at this point, I'm going to add my fillings. So I have my cilantro. And I like a lot of herbs, so I'm adding a lot, but that is totally your preference. The scallion, I'm probably not going to add all of it. My chives and my parsley. Now I'm going to add cheese to mine. I have some fresh grated cheddar cheese. I don't like to add my cheese until like right before I'm going to close my omelet, because I find that like if you add the cheese to the eggs while the eggs are still really wet, the texture of the omelet itself stays really wet. So that's just my preference. That's kind of up to you. But the important thing with making an omelet is that you don't want any color on it, or you want little color on it. So your omelet, if it's properly cooked, should not be brown. So a proper omelet should be light in color. So you don't want to cook it on a very high heat like a lot of people I think that you should. So at this point my egg is almost completely set, and I'm going to add my cheddar cheese. Save a little bit, I think, for the top. And I'm going to carefully flip it over. This is kind of the difficult part. It takes a little practice. I'm actually going to switch to a spatula. And you're going to take your spatula, just flip it over. No worries if it's not perfect. Take some practice. But as you can see, my omelet really doesn't have color on it, and it shouldn't really have color on it. So I'm going to kind of zoom in so you can see. And you're just making sure that it's cooking all the way through. So you're going to give it another minute. And you also don't want to fold it over until the egg is almost completely set. This way you know that it doesn't need much more time to cook once you actually do flip it. So I'll let it cook for another second on this side, and then I'll flip it to finish cooking it on the other side, and then you have a very simple omelet. Beautiful. Now if you did want to add a little color to it, that's fine. You can turn up your heat. Everyone has a different preference when it comes to eggs, I find, but a traditional omelet really shouldn't have much color in it. So that is up to you. But this is going to be super fresh because it has all those fresh herbs in it. And of course the cheese is going to make it really nice and decadent and creamy. So I'm super excited. So I can kind of tell this is done because the eggs were almost completely cooked through when I actually folded the omelet in half. So I am going to put this on my plate. Now I purposely saved these herbs and this little bit of cheese so that I could put it right on top as a garnish and make my omelet look super fancy, even though I'm just eating by myself. A little bit of the fresh scallion, a little bit of the fresh chives, the cilantro, and the parsley. And there you go. You have a perfect herb and cheese omelet made in seconds, maybe minutes. That is really nice and fresh and delicious. So if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'm going to put some recipes and links in the description as always. And thank you so much for watching this episode of What's That Food Friday and enjoying a beautiful fresh omelet with me. Happy Friday.